Hello and welcome to the Pharma Forum podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Comstock. One of the things that makes patient engagement for pharma companies so challenging is that it's not something that can be added to one step of the process and then checked off the list. Real patient engagement needs to be integrated into processes every step of the way. In today's podcast, brought to you by Reverba CEO Cheryl Lubbert is going to walk us through what that means, what it looks like, and some lessons you can take back to your organization about patient engagement throughout the product lifecycle. Welcome to the show, Cheryl.
Thanks, Jonah. Great to be here. Thank you.
To start out, tell me a little bit about yourself and about Reverba. Tell me your story.
Oh, that's great. Well, I have been the CEO at Reverba now for quite a while. Kind of are probably known by other names. We originally started out as health advocacy strategies, and then we added patient health perspectives. This is a subsidiary. And then also had a holding company of Health Perspectives Group for a while. And in 2021, we decided to come under one name, Reverba, so that it was really easy for our clients and customers to know who we were and where we were going. And my background is really about 30 years in the biopharmaceutical industry. I actually started out in bench research, working actually in labs, companies like Digene and also at UNC, but quickly transitioned into work for bigger companies like Bristol Myers Squibb, Immunex, Amgen, and Abbott Labs, where I was really lucky to be able to work on and build and launch some of the biggest products actually in the industry. In those roles that I had an opportunity to work across the entirety of the product lifecycle, whether it was engaging physicians to help train salespeople or work with them on publication plans or to work on what trial design should look like, or work with patient opinion leaders or advocacy, or work with payers and employer groups. So really the whole range of activity that you do across that product life cycle. And it was actually in these experiences where I first had the opportunity to see the power of connecting directly with patients. In fact, it was at Immunex when we were working on Enbrel. Just a little history lesson here. Enbrel was so popular when it launched that, in fact, we couldn't make enough drug. And so I was part of the team that managed the supply constraint. And as part of that, one of the things that we did was we built a wait list of over 40,000 patients. Okay. And at the time, if you think about this was a long time ago, and this was something that companies weren't doing. And what we did was we directly connected with people, created this wait list. And what we saw was that direct connection was meaningful to people. And that was really the foundation of where we are with Reverba today. And I would say with Reverba that our sole focus, or a really direct focus on amplifying the patient voice throughout the whole product lifecycle, is something that really differentiates us from other people. And in fact, it really has allowed us to make a difference for people and to help change healthcare one patient at a time. In fact, I would say we really have created the field of patient engagement over the last 20 years of the company's history.
That's really a lot of really interesting stuff there, and we may circle back to some of it. But let's talk about this term patient engagement. I think it's one of those terms in healthcare that sometimes can mean different things to different people. I know there's always been sort of a healthy debate about whether we should be talking about patient engagement, patient activation, patient centricity, something else. So why do you use that term, and what does it mean to you?
I think we should dissect this a bit because there are a lot of terms out there. There's centricity, there's activation, there's engagement. It means different things to different people. And that's actually an opportunity for actually the industry to kind of get sort of their heads around really what does this mean. But if we dissect this, you can be patient-centric. Okay, we've heard a lot about centricity, right? Which could mean that you're thinking about the patient and the choices that you're making. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually directly engaging with the patient. You could also be doing patient activation, which could mean that you're deploying a whole bunch of tactics or initiatives or programs that drive patients to sort of change their behavior or to think differently. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean you have that direct connection with them. And so when I think about patient engagement, I think of it as a direct relationship with that person or that consumer or their caregivers that you're serving. It's a mindset of centricity. It's tactics of activation, but it's a direct relationship with the patient that really is what we're talking about here. And you could argue that patient engagement is sort of the overarching piece that includes centricity and activation.
Right. But it has an activeness to it, right? You're engaging with them, they're engaging with you.
Two-way. It's like a two-way communication. It's not really this push constantly, right? A lot of the things that the industry has done for a long time is push things to people. And engagement to me is about sort of a two-way dialogue.
So, what I'd like to do with most of that half hour that we have together is really walk through this life cycle and talk about each of the steps along the way where we
Mhm.
need to be thinking about patient engagement. Where does it start? What's kind of the earliest point where you tell people they should be thinking about patient engagement, and what does it mean at that point?
It starts at the very, very first step when you're thinking in the discovery phase about what molecules you really want to actually invest in as a company. You need to understand where's the highest unmet need. And by the way you do that is you understand and you talk to patients, what's their journey? Where are they having issues and trouble? You're looking at sort of a bigger picture so that you can then hone in on the things you're trying to solve. And I mean, if you look in the marketplace today, obesity is one of the biggest things that is being focused on. And I think it's a perfect example of understanding what the high unmet need is. The industry is focused on that now and making sure that they're thinking about products that really help people. Alzheimer's, another area. Parkinson's, another area. These are things that we're all dealing with in our families and in our lives. And, the industry is understanding what the needs are there and deeply focusing on that. So discovery, I would say right at the beginning. How do you do that? Well, you do journey mapping. You can do advisory boards. And actually, before protocols are even developed, you can do co creation sessions with physicians and also with patients to say, what do you need to make this work for you? How do we get to the right endpoints that matter to both physician and the patient? And co creation sessions are a great way to do that. And to take a little bit of a dive here, I don't know, Jonah, but recently, if you're aware, but recently we actually acquired a company, 6 Medical, out of Canada. They're global and they are really experts on innovation and medical communications. So they are really great at helping us actually move much earlier and bringing that patient voice together with that physician voice in that earlier stage, in that kind of clinical stage, so that we can help companies do more of this connection.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That idea that, even before you have a drug or a trial, you're thinking about what do the patients need? What do patients
Mhm.
want? It almost
Mhm.
makes me think of pharma like compared to other industries, right? Like if you're
Mhm.
a grocery company, if you're making breakfast cereals, you want to engage with your customers and find out what they want before you start
Mhm.
developing. And pharma is almost the same, right?
Right, exactly the same. And if you think about it, it's not just what is the cereal, right? It's also how's it packaged? How does it last? How does it used? And the same thing is true here. We need to understand all aspects of what that patient journey is so that we can make sure that the total package of what we're bringing to market helps that patient live their life in a better way.
After discovery, we get into development, and obviously, there's phases of development that don't involve patients. If they were phase 1, 2, your animal studies, whatever. I guess briefly, is there a patient engagement opportunity there? And if not, when do we start thinking about engagement in the clinical trials?
You want to start with the engagement again at that protocol design stage because you really need to understand what kind of support patients need. It's not just, again, about that endpoint. It's also how do they get to the investigator sites? What kind of support do they need? How many lab tests do they need? Understanding that patient journey, doing those co creation sessions, doing those advisory boards, really important. Also, then thinking about what kind of support do you need to put in place for those trials? How do you explain the informed consent to patients? Getting feedback on that might be helpful because that's pretty intense legal document. Helping also have language to help patients understand what is the trial about? Why should they participate? Something else that's important. And then really making sure they understand why it's important to raise their hand and to be involved at all. Right. So
Yeah.
lots of opportunities there. And of course, then working with them not only to get in the trial, but to stay in the trial. Because trials are often long and complex, whether it's phase 2, phase 3. There's lots of requirements, lots of physician visits, maybe lots of lab tests. And so that might be overwhelming. So understanding how you can help those patients stay in the trial is also really important.
Yeah, I mean, a patient in a clinical trial is in such a complex position, right? Because they're a patient, they're being treated. We have to think of them
Mhm.
like patients. We're going through a difficult treatment journey often, but they're also a participant in research, and there's things they can do to be more and less helpful to that. And yeah, so the education piece to me seems really important and really perhaps more complicated than it sounds from the outside.
Some things we've done is put people on study teams, so patients into a study team, so that that study team always has that patient mindset front and center. There's an idea. I mentioned the co-creation sessions, but also patient days. Maybe you just have the patients come in to help provide their perspectives. You could also do, of course, the basic qual and quant research to understand the nuts and bolts of things, but that seems less personal. And then, of course, there's always this idea of doing analysis of advocacy groups and support groups to understand what do they see as the unmet need or the issues or the challenges. Also, those are oftentimes great places to connect with the patients who, or let patients know about clinical trials and what the opportunity is to participate and how to participate.
So when the clinical research is done, well, actually, let's sneak one more in here. One thing that's been interesting to me about, a lot of, I think companies might think, oh, the research is done. Now that patient's role is complete and our relationship with them is done. But I know there's a growing movement to be like, oh, maybe we should share our results with them, or how can the data from the trial help with their treatment? So do you want to talk at all about that kind of piece of patient engagement post-trial?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of funny because when we work with patients in trials, my favorite quote of all time is like, when the trial ends, it feels like you've been broken up with by text because you literally hear nothing else. That's a really like real world issue, right? And so one of the things we feel strongly about is let's keep that relationship going. Obviously, you've gotten people to raise their hand to participate in the trial. You want to actually maintain a relationship with those people because they are your customer. And why wouldn't you want to let them know what happened? Because otherwise it just feels like it's a hanging empty void for them. And they've taken all this time and effort to participate and help with advancing science. Why wouldn't we want to create lay summaries so they understand, okay, hey, what's happening here? What's the process here? What was the outcome? Stay tuned. Now, it's not about releasing things that are confidential in advance of getting the approval with the FDA, but giving people a thank you sometimes goes a long way. And, also making sure you keep a relationship with those patients is important because they might be also your first customer to benefit from the product when it comes to market.
Yeah.
So all those types of things. The other thing I would say is those are also individuals that can help as you're in that 12-month pre-approval timeframe to help get the word out about what the disease is and really raise awareness around that disease state. So it's an opportunity to have relationships with these people post-trial about what's your disease about, doing videos, getting feedback, training staff internally, coming up with educational materials. All those types of things also happen at this phase. And something we have done as an organization is really dissect each of these stages in clinical to really come up with core ways of helping bring that patient voice forward. So in discovery, co-creations, patient journey mapping, finding the right people and recruiting them for trials, but more importantly, making sure they're pre-qualified, and then using our technology to help get those people to investigator sites faster. While people are in trials, not asking them about what their experience is, not about the trial or the drug that they're in the trial for, but more, well, what's happening? Is the logistics going well? Are you feeling supported? Touching them with maybe educational information about their disease so that in fact they stay engaged in the trial. And then once the trial's over, helping them understand here's where we're at with the data. And also, here's what you can do to help continue to participate, to help raise awareness around this disease or this product. And of course, we have technology that underpins all of this to help make it modern. And that's a little bit of a side note, Jenna. I'm a big believer when we started our business, technology wasn't a real thing. We were still doing snail mail. For everything. That's what happens over 20 years. Today, though, we need technology to make the communication modern if we're going to be effective, engaging and having that two-way dialogue with patients. So what we have done is built technology to help each one of these phases go smoothly and to be able to engage the right people across the entirety of that clinical trial part of the product life cycle.
I want to sneak in one more question about clinical trials. 50% of those patients are on either placebo or standard of care, maybe not even getting the drug. Are there special considerations in how you communicate with them after the trial?
There are special considerations. Again, it's about really making sure you're building a relationship with them and communicating clearly and transparently with them. And I think that's that 12 to 18 month time frame when a trial's over to when things are coming to market. I've seen some really innovative programs happening with client companies where they're helping support those patients in that time frame. But again, it all starts with communication and a relationship.
So, what's next? Do we talk about launch next?
Well, I think launch is always a thing, and launch is interesting. It dovetails in that 12 to 18 month time frame. Most companies would like to start at 18 months. Most companies start at 12 for new products, for new indications. It's a critical time to engage patients. Again, it's a perfect opportunity to do disease awareness campaigns. And these people, the patient is critical to getting that word out, especially if it's something that people don't talk about a lot, especially when you're talking about rare conditions, things that may be diseases or conditions that people aren't as common. That's a great opportunity to really do brand awareness support. Patients love to share their stories. The reason they come and work with us is because they want to be able to give back and share their experiences. And there's opportunities for videos that can go up on websites, social campaigns, speaker programs to help educate people about the disease so we can raise people's health literacy and self-efficacy about their disease so they're asking the right questions when they're going into the doctor's office. And of course, all of this pre-launch is important because when you are launching, then you have the dialogue already started. And I think
Right.
that's really important. Also, it's a great opportunity to build out this educational materials for a disease, and patients, I think, are critical in what that should look like, as well as support programs. What access problems you're going to have when you go to payers? What kind of support do people need? Do they need copay cards? All those types of support pieces all can be done in that 12 to 18 month period prior to the approval of the product. And of course,
Right.
I also like to make sure that we have patients for the launch because, boy, nothing is more motivating when you actually get to hear from people who have benefited in the trials from things that are new.
You talked earlier about kind of some of the stuff around the drug, the packaging, the delivery methods,
Mhm.
what have you. All that stuff, really, patient experience is really crucial to sort of understand, like, are patients able to use this and do this, and is it easy and
Mhm.
seamless? But when does that come in?
You need to do that early as you're planning to get ready for launch, but it also happens post launch because there's a lot of things you don't understand until you have more people on product. And I would say that's also part of the product life cycle sort of evolution, if you will. As you're learning more and more people are taking it, you're understanding what the real world issues are, and then you want to kind of circle back and find out what those are. One of an interesting case study and an experience we had was we were working with a product that had a little bit of a difficult start, and there was a lot of misinformation in the marketplace at its launch about what that start looked like. And it was interesting because the people who were having the conversation weren't on product. And it was kind of all a little bit negative, if you will. And what we were able to do is to go out and talk to people who were on product and understand how they felt and actually come up with a campaign that really worked to change that dialogue. And it was through that direct connection with those patients and the one product that allowed us to change the conversation on social for the people who weren't on product yet. And it actually made that product a blockbuster after we kind of adjusted the messaging because we were connected with the patient. And of course, from Reverba's standpoint, our focus is the patient and the patient dialogue, and we partner with advertising agencies and PR firms and our clients, all to make sure that that perspective is brought to bear and that we have something that's an integrated approach in the marketplace.
So, have we missed anything? Is that the end of the story? I think we talked a little bit about how, like, even as long as the product's in the market, you want to continue to have a relationship with patients, right?
Yes. And even after actually patent expiry, we work on a ton of products that no longer have patents in place, but the dialogue is still important. Clients of ours who work with celebrities for awareness campaigns, I think it's important to bring a real patient voice in and real people in who are living with the condition so that it feels real and it feels like something that's approachable for somebody and that they feel comfortable asking. One of the other things I think that's important is once you're in market and you're in a commercial phase, I think having that direct connection between patients, like mentor programs, for example. Somebody who, this is something we've had a ton of success with. In fact, we did the first mentor program in the industry back in 2007. But having somebody who's on product have a chance to share their experience with somebody who's newly diagnosed or thinking about going on a product is a very, very important tool that people can use in the industry to kind of advance patients' understanding, make that connection, and give them the support they need to make that big change. Or just even doing something as simply as having patients and physicians, again, I talked about that MedCom piece, but having patients and physicians talk to other patients to help raise their health literacy as it relates to what is this disease, what is this condition, what is somebody else's experience, and that brings them along as well. So I think that's a really nice opportunity. The bottom line is that the patient has a role every step of the way in the product life cycle. You need a patient-centric mindset throughout the company, and you also need to make sure that they're doing it in a sort of a centralized way so that everybody in the company is thinking about it in the same way, but also in a compliant way. Of course, we are a heavily regulated industry. So I don't want to leave compliance out because that is something that's important and also something that we've put a lot of effort and energy towards making sure we're doing the right way. I mean, people are sharing the most intimate aspects of their lives when they're sharing their experiences around their health conditions. We want to make sure that they feel comfortable and also heard when they're participating and partnering. We also want to help them build that trust. And that just leads me to one more thing that I think is really important in this month. But diversity and cultural understanding is becoming even more and more important. We can't lose sight of how important it is to be inclusive in our conversations around healthcare, making sure that we have different ethnicities and diversity of experience and socioeconomic levels in our conversations with people so we understand the totality of the experience so we can create programs and support that work for everybody. So I just wanted to make sure we included that thought too. It's more difficult, but it's something that we have to solve for and do a better job of.
So we have a few minutes. We can sort of dig into some of the things you've brought up. We could talk about compliance or about diversity or about technology.
All three of my hot buttons.
I'd love to talk a little bit about tech.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that what you do has changed so much over 20 years, which makes sense. But I'm sure it's also changing a lot right now as we look at these sort of conversational AIs and things. There's an opportunity there for really good bespoke patient engagement, but I'm sure also some danger. So how are you guys thinking about sort of how your communication and your engagement is changing with technology right now?
Well, it's interesting. There are some things we have to really have our eyes wide open about. AI can help us get information faster. Chatbots are very interesting as it relates to sort of asking questions and getting answers, especially if you're a patient, you want to get the data instantly. But you also have to pressure test that, just like anything that we're getting on the internet. Is it true? Is it accurate? What's the basis for this information? The other thing I think we have to really have our eyes wide open about is privacy and how things are being used and where the data is going. That is something that's top of mind for me when I think about the use of AI. The bigger thing is what's real, that the real authentic patient with AI is going to be, we're going to have to validate what is real because it's so easy with AI to make something that looks real but isn't. And so that direct connection, that direct relationship, that validation that this is a real person sharing this experience, I think is going to become paramount in everything that we do. In-person meetings are not over. Virtual meetings like what we're doing right now. This is important because I can see you and I know that you are a real person talking to me today. It's going to be something that people are going to be looking for. There's a lot that has to be taken into consideration from an operational effectiveness standpoint. I mean, these tools are fantastic for us to capture real experiences. I think the key is making sure that they maintain their accuracy and authenticity.
So just the last few minutes, let's talk a little bit more about, the diversity, the representation piece. I mean, how do you make sure that's integrated into all of your patient engagement efforts, everything we've talked about today? You're not just talking to some patients, but a representative group of patients.
So it's a great question. This is a challenge for the industry. And when I think about sort of diversity, you want to look at what the disease demographics are, and that's really what your split should be when you're looking at men, women, different ethnicities. And so, how do you go about doing that? Well, I think you can't just use digital, because digital is going to get you one slice. We all know that there's lots of algorithms out there that want to show you exactly what you've already liked. And if we go down that path, we're not getting the diversity that we need. So that requires that we open our minds to some old school tactics. Let's go into communities. Let's talk to real people through different avenues, not just the avenues that, are on the internet. The avenues that are on the internet can maybe guide where we go to look. Really important that we always think about where people who have a different disease or condition work, live, or play, and think about what their lives are really like, and then go to those places to engage them. So is it a senior center? Are they going to be the people you find on digital? Maybe not. Maybe a phone call is the best way to deal there. Maybe snail mail is the best way to deal there. Maybe social is a great place if you're looking for people who are, in a younger demographic, but you also have to think that actually a lot of younger generations are now off of social. So where do we go to find them? So you really have to stay up on sort of consumer behavior as a whole, and then really think deeply about what is this population's challenge, where are they, and how do we get to them? And I would say that applies globally. And I think the other thing that's a real consideration is just because you've switched the language doesn't mean that it's culturally appropriate. And, one of the things that I love about working with our MedComs group is they remind us that, even simple differences, like maybe it's the birds and the bees works in the Toronto area, if you're talking about sort of a baby coming, but maybe in Quebec, it's about the stork. And you have to really be thinking about those differences when you go into different areas and when you're talking in different languages. And it's not just simply enough to translate.
Well, I think we have to cut it off there. We've reached our time, but thank you so much, Cheryl. Really interesting across the board. Clearly have a ton of expertise and experience with this. And I hope this has been really helpful to folks to broaden how they think about patient engagement as they do every kind of part of their day-to-day job.
All right. Well, thank you, Jonah. It was really a pleasure. And I'm very passionate about raising awareness of how we change the industry and help people and change healthcare.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you joining me to do that today.
All right. Great. Have a great day.
That concludes this episode of the Pharma Forum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about other installments in the series at pharmaforum.com/podcast. The Pharma Forum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher, and Podme, where you can find and subscribe by searching for Pharma Forum. And don't forget to visit our website, where you can sign up for daily news and analysis bulletins, and to follow us on Twitter at PharmaForum. Thanks for listening.